Also like to thank Joe for this wonderful room and setting this up for us. Thank you very much, Joe.
Welcome. Thank you, Julie. And actually, you shouldn't thank me for this room. Thank the taxpayers of Maricopa County. Before I get started on this presentation, I'd like to get a show of hands that'll help me greatly. So, if you are currently confident in participating in meetings in your organization where Robert's Rules of Order are used, please raise your hand. And don't be afraid, I'm not going to call on you. I just want to see where we are right now. Okay, so about half. Okay, that's good. If you did not raise your hand, you're the reason why I'm here. I believe that the members of an organization need to be confident in participating in their organization. You, as a member, are the organization. It's not the chair, it's not the leadership, it's not the executive board, it is the members where the power and the influence of the organization come from. And so therefore, I've been in many, many meetings over the years in a variety of organizations, and I see again and again members are reluctant to participate. They're afraid they're going to get shot down, ruled out of order. They don't know when they can make a motion. We've all seen motions be made, but you don't quite know when you should do it. All those little things, I think, are important to talk about. A lot of times, we parliamentarians will talk about the technicalities of making a motion, doing a point of order. And that's important, but first you need to feel confident in order to actually do it in an actual meeting. So that's why I'm here. I advocate for this, for Robert's Rules at every possible opportunity, because I want to empower people, especially the people in the organizations that I'm a member of, where I've seen egregious violations in the past that really shut down the membership and to the detriment of everyone. Before we get into the actual rules, I want to talk about some background so that you have some context of where this all fits in. All right, first of all, the origin of Robert's Rules of Order. As Dan said previously, very eloquently, the purpose of it is to have some order in meetings where everyone is treated fairly. And the origin of Robert's Rules was born out of an effort. General Henry M. Robert in 1872, I believe it was, chaired a meeting. Just like Dan talked about, he chaired a meeting. General Roberts' meeting was a disaster. I believe it was a 9-hour-long meeting, total disaster. And after that, he said, you know what, there's got to be some order, some rules. His vision was to make it like the rules of baseball. I know you used bowling as an analogy. Robert used baseball. And he said, when you go to play baseball on a sandlot, as kids used to do before they had iPods, you'd show up at a parking lot. Everybody knew the rules. Everybody knew the rules and how to play, and they played together. And a complex game with all kinds of moving parts, right? Well, his vision was that would be what meetings were like. No matter where you go, no matter what organization you participate in, the rules are the same. And so that's something that we should work towards. So the purpose of Robert's Rules are to assure fairness so that everybody has a say, nobody gets shut down, at least not without a large majority of people agreeing that person should be shut down. We'll talk about that a little bit later. To facilitate deliberation, right? There are rules for debate. When you are debating in an organization, some people have a tendency to go on a little bit long. Some people tend to be, a little bit too aggressive with other members. So there are a lot of rules to facilitate deliberation and improve decision-making, right? Decision-making is done typically with voting, and there are many specific rules on voting to make sure that they're fair. And when the voting is fair, there will be generally a lot of agreement, and there will be a lot of consensus to move forward. When voting isn't done correctly, as I've seen in many of the organizations that I participate in, the confidence in the decision-making is not there, and you have disgruntled people who don't think the voting went correctly, and then they don't want to participate, and it hurts the organization. We see it even on the national level, just recently with one of the political parties. The voting, people had no confidence in the voting that was done. In a political party that I'm a member of, they do what's called proxy voting. Sometimes they use electronic voting, which some people really didn't trust. hurt the organization. So Roberts addresses all those things. That's the purpose of it. I want to say also that some people have a bad view of Roberts. Some people think that it causes contention. Some of the meetings I've participated in at the state level in a political party have been very contentious. Some people look and they say, well, look, you're using Robert's Rules of Order and there's chaos. Why is all this contention happening? The answer is not because people are trying to follow Robert's rules. It's because they're trying to violate Robert's rules, right? And so that's something that I want to address here. I want to make sure that when everybody follows the rules, the meetings go smoothly. When somebody tries to violate the rules, that's when the disorder occurs. Okay. All right. So that's the purpose of this. I had a colleague of mine in one of the organizations who said, Joe, he said, you're not going to like me, but I'm going to put in a motion that we get rid of Robert's Rules of Order for our meetings because of all the contention that you're causing in these meetings. You know. So I said, okay, great. If you can get a 2/3 vote on that, but good luck. Also, in the mass media, you will see every time Robert's Rules is portrayed, whether it be on TV or in movies, you'll see ridiculous things happening, and they kind of mock it, like, oh, these people are just ridiculously fanatical rules followers. Well, it's not like that at all. It doesn't have to be. And we'll see how the genius of Robert's Rules addresses that concern.
Joe, when that happens, when people say they want to abolish Robert's Rules, don't you feel like asking them, all right, then what rules would you like me to follow? Just my own opinion, my own subjective opinion of what's fair, and I'll call on my friends first, rather than back and forth?
Well, I can address that. I can give you the actual answer to your question. I asked that very question. Then what should we do? Okay. In not so many words, his answer was, well, the chair. We elect the chair, and the chair gets to make these decisions. So this person is more of an authoritarian bent who believe that, well, when we elect the chair, then the chair has all the power. And I think he believes that now because the chair in this group is favorable to him. But if somebody like me were to be elected chair, he definitely would not like that, right? Okay. So let's talk about, again, before we get into the actual rules, let's talk about the scope. Okay. Robert's Rules only apply if they are invoked by your organization's bylaws. If your organizations do not invoke Robert's Rules of Order, none of this applies. It's good to follow. I think it's excellent practice, and you should make an effort to get your bylaws to invoke them. But otherwise, really, this doesn't count. Okay. So take a look at your bylaws and make sure that they are invoked so that you can actually use this wonderful tool. Another thing, the bylaws trump Robert's Rules of Order. General Henry M. Robert was not so arrogant to think that he could come up with a list of rules that would apply equally to all organizations. Right? Many organizations have special needs, and he recognized that. And so in Robert's Rules, it specifically says, if your bylaws differ from what's included in this book, then your bylaws take precedence. So if there's something that your organization doesn't like in Robert's Rules of Order, you can override it. Generally speaking, Roberts only applies to your organization's rules where your organizational rules are silent. If your organization's bylaws don't mention something, then Roberts applies to that particular issue. Okay. Yes, Jonna.
What happens if your bylaws don't have a policy and Roberts doesn't have a policy? Does it go to state law?
If Roberts doesn't have a policy and your bylaws also don't have a policy, then your organization can decide for yourself by majority vote with motions how you want to deal with that particular issue. There is another class of rules called special rules of order, that if unusual situations come up that are unique to your organization, you can pass these rules. You can create these rules called special rules of order, or standing rules, I should say. Standing rules. They go along with your bylaws, and they can have very specific situations covered. So, yeah, standing rules is the answer to your question. Whatever I say here, I'm backing it up with actual references to the actual text. So you can go look at it in context and read that section if you like. Okay, basic facts. These are just things that you should just be aware of. First of all, The abbreviation for Robert's Rules of Order is RONR. That stands for Rules of Order Newly Revised. That's the abbreviation that all the parliamentarians use when they refer to this book. When you're voting, this is something that most of us know, but sometimes I hear it differently. When you're voting, you say either aye for yes or no for no. Don't say nay. Nay isn't used. The only place I hear it used is the U.S. House of Representatives. I don't know why they use it there, but they're really an anomaly in more ways than one, I guess. But if you're in an organization, when you're voting yes, you say aye. When you're voting no, you say no. Okay. Role of a parliamentarian. All right. This bears some discussion. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
No, I actually had a comment. One way to remember no and nay is what horses do. They neigh.
Yes.
Just to add a little bit there.
Absolutely, and we don't want to do that. Thanks. Thank you, Marilyn. All right, so the role of a parliamentarian. This is something that's really, really important. A parliamentarian is, in most cases, utterly powerless in a meeting. A parliamentarian cannot make rulings. They cannot make rulings. If somebody says, well, the parliamentarian ruled me out of order, that's not true. It can't happen. A parliamentarian is there only to advise the chair of the meeting. And the chair, who is the president of the organization and usually a member of the meeting, of the organization, makes the decision. Parliamentarian coming from the outside is generally not even a member of the organization, and therefore they can't even speak in the meeting, right? But they can advise the chair on proper parliamentary procedures. That's what a parliamentarian does. Okay? Yes, Phil.
I've forgotten about how that occurs. Let's say somebody raises a point of order. The chair is not really sure how to rule on the point of order. Does he need to call a recess and say, let me discuss with the parliamentarian first? Or can he just turn to the parliamentarian and say, what do you think?
Yeah, either way is perfectly fine. Remember, the chair makes that decision. If the chair asks the parliamentarian, what do you think, and tell the whole group, he's given the ability of the parliamentarian to speak the entire group.
And still
that's okay.
The chair's prerogative to agree with the parliamentarian or not.
Right. I think most chairs would say something like, stand at ease, and that's a sort of an informal way of doing a brief recess, and then he or she will talk to the parliamentarian in quiet, on the side, so that he can or she can listen to what the parliamentarian says, and if he or she disagrees with the parliamentarian, can still rule the way he wants without embarrassing himself or the parliamentarian.
And then it's up to the assembly to decide if they want to appeal from the chair or not.
Right. And I'm going to talk about appeals soon in this discussion. But yes, that's.
It does not need to call a recess.
No, just say stand at ease, and it's an informal, short recess. He could do a recess if it's a complicated problem, but it's generally not necessary as far as I've seen. The parliamentarian, according to the rules, is supposed to sit right next to the chair so they can collaborate during the meeting without any delay. So, okay, pleasure. Okay, one other thing too on this note. Sometimes an organization will hire a presider, someone who's really good at running meetings. The bylaws of the party that I participate in has in their bylaws that the chair of the party can hire a presider to come in and run the meeting instead of the chair. That presider then has all the power of the chair during the meeting, even if they're not a member of that particular party or organization. So that person usually is a parliamentarian, right? But they are not the parliamentarian for the meeting. When they're hired as a presider, they're acting as a chair for that meeting, and they have all the power of a chair. Okay? That's an important distinction to make. I've heard the term parliamentarian used lately as one who runs a meeting, and that's not the case at all, right? It's a presider or the chair who runs the meeting. Are you with me? Is that a clear distinction? Okay, thank you. I think it's an important one. All right. Patterns of formality. This is another one that I referred to just recently. If you're looking at the mass media and you see how meetings are portrayed using Robert's Rules of Order, you get a distorted view of what Robert's Rules is all about. Okay, I think of the Bible, and I think it's from Matthew, where it said that the Sabbath was made for man, man wasn't made for the Sabbath. Right? In a similar way, Robert's Rules was made for meetings. Meetings weren't made for Roberts. And what that means is they're supposed to be helpful and not a hindrance to you in running the meeting. So, for example, if you have a very small group of like-minded people, there's no need to go through a very formal process, taking votes on every little thing and doing points of order. If it's a group of less than about 12 or so, you can get by without any of that formality. So now let's get into the actual fundamental principles involved here that everything in this 700-page book is meant to support. These fundamental principles. The rights of members, first of all. The rights of members. I think we all intuitively understand what the rights of members are in most cases. You have a right as a member to attend meetings. You have a right to speak in debate. And you have a right to vote. Okay? That, I think, is clear and well understood and universally recognized everywhere in all organizations. But that second one listed there, the right to make motions, that's the one that bears some discussion. Yes, Phil?
I have a question with this first one. Attend meetings.
Yes.
Somehow some of the acquaintances that I have don't believe that members should be permitted to attend meetings.
Whoa.
They think that we elect a board, and then the board will take over and tell us what to do for the entire year. And once a year, we'll elect a new board if we don't like what that board did.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll re-elect that same board.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for breaking through that mentality?
Okay, yes. Okay, so a couple of things. First, the board is a committee in the organization, and according to Robert's Rules of Order, if you're not a member of that board, then you actually don't have a right to attend that. That's actually in the rules. They could voluntarily allow you to attend as a guest, but they're not obligated to do that. So a board can keep you out. In fact, any committee that you're not appointed to has the right to exclude you from attending those meetings.
It's a board meeting, not a regular meeting.
But not a regular meeting of the group, yes.
The problem is state law oversees or supersedes Roberts.
Okay.
And state law requires HOA meetings to be open, both board and the membership meetings.
Thank you.
So they have to be open.
Thank you. Yes, so if your organization is controlled by state law, then of course that supersedes everything that we do here. Yes?
With the difference between, on what you're speaking about, is it non-profit and profit organizations?
No difference.
No difference there? So a non-profit could possibly fall underneath that same category of the state law would supersede?
Of course, nonprofits do fall under state law. Nonprofits and profits all follow and fall under the state laws in Arizona.
So one other thing I'd like to add to this discussion to answer Phil's question specifically. Even if the board doesn't allow you to attend, remember the main meetings, the membership as a whole can override whatever the board decides. Right? You are the power. The membership is where the power lies in the organization. So whatever the board decides to do, the assembly can override that with a simple vote.
Majority vote?
Majority vote. Yep.
The board derives their power from the members. And they only have the power that the members are willing to give them.
That's right. Now, they won't like that when you tell them that.
But that's the answer to your question.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
how you get them to come around, is that they derive their powers from the members, not the other way around. And again, most HOA boards think they are gods. They think they have all of this authority and power, and the members have none.
Jonna.
So at a membership meeting, and if a member wants to make a motion, does that motion have to be presented in advance?
No. You can, if you want to. You can present it to the chair or the presider in advance to say, hey, I'm planning on doing this, but there isn't an obligation to. And in fact, I'm going to get into more details about just when you can make motions in a subsequent slide. That's a very important question. I wanted to spend some time discussing that. Because now I'm talking about making motions here as one of the rights of members. Many organizations try to discourage that for whatever reason. They want the meeting to go quickly. They don't want to hear any contentious issues or controversies, any number of reasons. They might not like you, okay, but you have the right to make actual motions. All members have the right to make motions. And there are some specific things I want to talk about when we get to that point. But this is something I'm going to go into in more depth, okay, in just a couple of minutes. Okay, deliberations. Okay, some fundamental principles involved here. Number one, the minority gets to be heard. I think that one is pretty standard. Everybody agrees that everybody gets a chance to weigh in on an issue. I don't think anybody significant would disagree with that one. But this one, the majority decides, is the one that bears a lot of study here. People don't understand that the majority is the assembly as a whole. There's a lot of applications to this. We just talked about the board. The majority can override the board because the majority decides. If a chair rules somebody out of order, okay, that's one person. Does one person decide the issue? No, it's the majority. So there must be some way for the organization as a whole to override the chair. And we're going to talk about that way, again, in just a couple of minutes. But everything in Roberts, this big, thick book, supports these fundamental principles. And when these fundamental principles conflict with each other, as there are some certain instances where they do, then it provides a nice balance between the rights that are expressed here. You need some way to enforce people to stay on topic to make a decision before moving on to something else. And the way to do that is...
Make a motion prior to the debate.
Exactly.
Ma'am, to say that's the chair's responsibility, correct, to keep it...
Yeah. If somebody starts going off like that, the chair might suggest politely, would you like to make a motion? Right? Would you like to make a motion? I will tell you, in meetings, the thing that I really dislike hearing the most, when I'm sitting in a meeting and we're trying to get business done, somebody will raise their hand and say, I think something needs to be done. And then they'll talk about something that needs to be done. And then other people will chime in, but, and it'll go on and on and on and on. What I think should be done is, if you ever feel the need to say, something should be done, do a couple of things. First, think specifically about what should be done. What do you want the organization to do? Number two, move it. Once you do that and you move it, now the focus must be on your specific question, and it will be voted up or voted down before you can move on to the next item in the agenda. It's a fast, efficient way to run a meeting, and it saves lots and lots of time and frustration. Mike.
I think it's important to note there that the members share the responsibility with the chair. If the chair is not doing it, then the member should call them to order and get them back on track.
Exactly right. So the member, yes.
And how would that be done?
Point of order, point of information, the chair's not sticking to the topic.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways of doing it. I think the key is to do it in a diplomatic way so that people don't feel like they're being shut down. A phrase that I like to use is hold that thought. Hold that thought and either make a motion. If they talk something other than the motion, say hold that thought, and we'll get to that after this motion is disposed of. That way they don't feel like they're being taken advantage of. If somebody talks about something that they want to have happen, the chair or another member of the organization could say, please make a motion to that effect. Do you have a motion for us? And then the chair should help that person to make a motion that can then be debated and discussed. And if during the discussion somebody goes off on a topic that's not germane, that is not related to the motion at hand, the chair or some other member should say, could you please hold that thought, right? Hold that thought, and then we'll get to that after we dispose of this motion. Okay?
Can the chair make a motion?
In small groups, if nobody objects, it's okay. In larger groups where you're following a little bit more formality, no, it's generally not. But the chair can prod other people to do so. Do I hear a motion to do whatever. I would entertain a motion to adjourn, that sort of thing. And that makes it more official. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed you before. Sorry about that.
You needed to answer that question. In the organization I belong to, the parliamentarian is a non-voting member of the executive board and a voting member of the general board. Okay. So, to your point, is the parliamentarian allowed to bring up point of order? When a meeting starts happening like that, can the parliamentarian do that?
If the parliamentarian is a member, then they can. But in my opinion, and Mike, you can chime in on this too. In my opinion, it's a bad idea. I'm on the executive board of a county party, and the opportunity came up for me to be the parliamentarian for that group that I'm a member of. And I very respectfully declined that opportunity, because had I done so, people know that I'm not neutral on a lot of issues, right? It would not be fair to the people who I disagree with to be put in a situation where I'm the parliamentarian. Also, and this is sort of the real reason, I have to admit, I believe that I was asked to serve as parliamentarian because the chair knew that I would not then be able to participate in discussion and debate and voting. Because a parliamentarian really should not engage in those things when they're serving as parliamentarian. So, Mike, did you have anything to add on that?
Well, only that, again, when you said it, if they're a member, you can't take their members' rights away. You take their voting right away. So, to enter in debate and some of the other things still exist, they just can't vote. And it goes back, I shouldn't say it, but I've been around too long. But nobody has ever been able to show me any place in Roberts that says the chair can't make a motion. It's just, if the chair makes a motion, you now show your bias, or can show your bias, and that's against everything we know about Roberts. The chair is supposed to be neutral. So the chair, if they're acting correctly, they're probably not going to ever make a motion. They're going to put a motion into somebody's hands and let them make the motion so that they can do their job and remain neutral.
Okay, so this is what we were just talking about. The second thing, the motion must be debated and disposed of with a vote before you move on to something else. Now, what happens if you can't make a decision? Okay, there's a few ways of dealing with this. You can vote to postpone this motion. Postpone it to a future meeting, for example. So you can make a motion to postpone a motion. That's one way of disposing of it. Okay, you can all agree that let's not decide this right now. You can vote to refer it to a committee. If it's a complicated thing, a committee can take a lot more time discussing and debating it. Okay, or in an urgent situation, if a fire breaks out, you've got to evacuate the building, you can vote to table the motion until the urgent situation is taken care of. Tabling doesn't kill a motion, it just temporarily puts it aside until the meeting can reconvene in an urgent situation. So these are all the good things that a motion does and how it works, why you should always do it. The big question that I used to have a lot before I studied this was, okay, that's great, but when? When can I actually do this during a meeting? People are talking the whole time. When should I jump up and make a motion? And the answer, well, the short answer to the question is anytime. Anytime you can get recognized by the chair, you can make a motion. And quoting from Roberts, it says, if the assembly has no binding order of business, any member who obtains the floor can introduce any legitimate matter he desires at any time when no business is before the assembly for consideration. Okay, now that's the short answer. The longer answer is, actually, it's a good idea to withhold your motion until a good opportunity comes up to raise it. And there are two places traditionally in a meeting where you should feel very confident making a motion. The first place is under new business. New business should be an agenda item on all agendas in meetings. This is where the membership has the opportunity to introduce business to the organization. During new business, the chair is obligated to invite the membership to make motions. Right? The chair will say, is there any new business? Or is there any further new business? Pause and let the membership make a motion. If this item is left off the agenda, which I see all the time, it's a clue that the chair doesn't want to hear any motions from anybody. Right? Don't be embarrassed to say, Mr. Chairman, point of order, you left new business off the agenda, or something to that effect. Okay, so, Jonna.
So if the board is having a meeting with some members there, and the board has no new business, then can the members actually bring up a motion?
Well, if it's a board meeting, only board members can bring up issues to the board. If it's a general meeting, you can bring up, issues in that meeting. Okay. Yes, Dorothy.
About legitimate matters to make motions on, is there any time when a chairman should not entertain a motion?
Yes.
Such as, someone can say, I'll move that Dorothy's head be cut off.
Yes.
So what are those instances?
Okay. Rather than answer that question right now, I'm going to refer you to a video online. It's about 53 minutes long, which gets into all the reasons why a chair might do that and how you should respond. Go to practicalrobertsrules.com, and the video is on there. It's called The Rights of a Member, because that's a very good question, and it deserves a long answer that takes about an hour to give. Okay. The short answer is, if the chair doesn't like your motion and rules it out of order, you can either accept that or you can appeal from the decision of the chair, which would let the assembly override that chair's decision. That's a thumbnail sketch of how to deal with a situation like that. And it happens all the time. Okay, so I talked about, yes?
There is another issue, though, that would stop it even more quickly. Our organization prohibits any political discussion. If somebody brought up, let's have the mayor come and give his, candidate speech, you instantly would stop. That say it's out of order because our bylaws prohibit it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and they couldn't even vote it in.
That's right. That's right. That would violate the bylaws, which you can't do. That's right. Absolutely. And that's an example of a situation where the bylaws rule. Yeah. They take precedence over Roberts or anything else. Okay, so that's the first place to make motions, under new business. There is another far less well-known place to do it legitimately, according to Roberts, that people need to know about. And that is after an officer or a board or a committee report. Mm-hmm. Earlier in the meeting, the committees, the officers, the boards, they make reports. If any of those reports have a recommendation in them, any member of the assembly can move that recommendation. So if an officer says, I recommend that whatever, once that report is done, any member of the organization can stand up and say, I move that we act on that recommendation, that we adopt that recommendation. And according to Robert's rules, it must be dealt with right then at that time. Debated, discussed, voted upon. Okay? Little known fact, but a true one, an important one. And sometimes, if you have a chair that refuses to put new business on the agenda and refuses to entertain new business, become an officer of that organization so that you can make recommendations and then have a friend in the assembly move it for you. I've done that several times. It works wonders. It works wonders. The chair will not like it, but this is what the rules say. Okay? The assembly has the right to make motions. Occasionally, when I've done that, the chair would say, can we hold that off until new business? Is there any objection to holding that motion off till new business? And my answer is always, sure, no, I have no problem with that. Let's do it under new business. But then you have to be ready, because new business isn't on the agenda, at the end of the meeting to say, point of order, we need to act on my motion. Okay, so don't be hesitant to do that. You have the right. Your vote, your participation is just as important as the chair's in the organization. Now we know what a motion does. We know when you can do it. Now let's talk about how you do it. How do you make a motion? I think there's some understanding of this in this room here. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this. But first, you must get recognized. You can't just shout it out, right? You state your motion. And state the motion briefly and succinctly and definitely. Be sure to have the wording done before you start. In fact, even better, write it down. Write it down and hand it to the chair so that there is no doubt whatsoever as to what you said, and you don't start discussing and debating what word should go where. Okay? So be specific. You always say, I move that, and then complete the sentence. You can move a resolution. If you've got a long resolution with whereases and stuff like that, make sure you have that written down. Give a copy to everybody in the room, and then stand up and say, I move that we adopt the resolution that. Okay. The chair has the right to require any motions in writing. And that's something that a chair should do. That's something that I do, just to save time. Okay. What I actually do when I'm participating in a big meeting to protect myself is I have a sheet of carbon paper and a clipboard, and I write down whatever motion I want to write down at that particular moment, hand the original to the chair, and keep a copy. Because I've had an experience in a state party meeting with 1,000 people there, the presider changed the wording of my motion. But I had handed it to him in writing. So I raised a point of order, and I said, Mr. Chairman, it says this. That particular presider actually apologized and said, you're absolutely right, and the problem was solved. But if it wasn't in writing, it could have caused a lot of trouble because it was an important word. Okay, motions need to be seconded. Just shout out second. You don't need to be recognized to shout out second. One thing that I would encourage you to do is if somebody moves something and you're not sure if it needs a second or not, some motions don't need seconds. But it can't hurt to yell second anyway, right? If you agree with it, you're showing support, right? Nominations, for example, don't need to be seconded. Things like that. But shout out second anyway if there's any doubt whatsoever. Second everything, right? I'll make motions sometimes and I don't hear any seconds, and I know that at least half the organization agrees with me. So I'll turn from the microphone and I'll say, hey, I need a second on that. And everybody will shout out, second! So after you second the motion, the chair must state the motion. It is moved and seconded that, and then states the motion. At that point, we have debate. The chair puts the question. The chair will say, is there any further debate? Are you ready for the question? When they say, are you ready for the question, that means, are you ready to, do you want more debate or do you want to vote? If nobody says anything, you vote, and then the chair must announce the result. So, yes. Aiden.
Couple questions. At the end, does a member have any right to call for a recorded vote versus a voice vote or show of hands?
Well, if there's a voice vote and it's close, any member can shout out division. Okay, that's actually a motion that requires no second. Any one person in the organization can force what's called a rising vote. Whereas if the voice vote is close, one member shouts out division, the chair is then obligated to have a rising vote, where people who vote aye stand, then they sit. The people who vote no stand and then sit. And the chair can look and see which side wins more accurately than if it's a voice vote. But that doesn't force a counted vote. If you want to actually have the vote actually counted, then you have to vote on that. And that takes a majority vote.
Okay, so in the case where you've got somebody with 30 proxies, it's only one person to stand up.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the problems with proxies. A voice vote is irrelevant with proxies, right? It's not legitimate. And a standing vote isn't really. What they do in my district is the chair will say, okay, stand up and hold up the number of proxies you have on your fingers, right? And then they'll have a teller walking around actually counting people and counting fingers. Not a good idea. That's why proxies are strongly discouraged by Robert's Rules of Order. What I have told you is theoretically everything that's needed. If everybody's following the rules, meetings will go great with everything that you just heard. Unfortunately, sometimes the rules aren't followed. I want to give you a summary of rules that I see that are commonly violated, okay? And I'll get through these as quickly as I can, and then we'll talk about how to deal with violations of those rules. So first, authority. We talked about this already. Parliamentarians cannot make rulings. The board is subordinate to the full assembly. We already mentioned that. It's the assembly that has all the power. Okay, under the decorum category. When you speak as a member, you must address the chair only and not other members. This is often violated, and it's kind of hard to discipline yourself to not talk directly to another person who's sitting right next to you, but it's officially what you're supposed to do, and things will run smoothly if the chair selects people to talk one at a time. That way we won't have shouting and a big melee going on. Members do not speak without first having the floor. Okay, that stands to reason. The chair must recognize any member who seeks the floor while entitled to it. You cannot be ignored. And if you are ignored, there are ways of dealing with it that are in the advanced presentation that I'll be giving next year, I guess, at the same time and place. It takes a little bit of technical ability, though, to be able to deal with that. Okay, motions. Members can make motions. New items of business during new business. The chair must state the motion after it is made and seconded. Only one motion at a time. No discussion without a motion. Debate must be germane to the motion. Chair cannot enter into debate. All these are listed here for you with references to Robert's Rules of Order. So if you, during a meeting, raise one of these rules, you say, point of order, you broke this rule, you can cite page and line number where it says in our parliamentary authority that what you said is true. I think that's important because a lot of people don't necessarily know what these rules are. Okay, voting. Once a motion is made and seconded, it must be dealt with. Proxy voting is not allowed. Proxy voting is not allowed. Again, bylaws can overrule that, but to their great detriment. Okay. Disciplinary actions. Okay, a chair has no authority to kick a member out of the room. I saw this happen too. This is past January. The chair said, "That's once. 2 more times if I have to warn you, I'm kicking you out of the room." The chair had no authority to do that, but nobody knew that, so everybody was very quiet and listened to what the chair said. And also, it's possible to adopt a motion of censure without formal disciplinary proceedings. If you want to censure somebody, you can. You don't need to go through trials and all kinds of processes. Those are the rules, and if everybody followed those rules, things would go smoothly, but we all know that doesn't always happen. So, how do you enforce the rules when they're broken? One common way of doing it is with a point of order. When a member thinks that the rules are being violated, he can make a point of order, thereby calling on the chair for a ruling and enforcement of the regular rules. Okay, so I'm running out of time and I can't get into the details of this, but suffice it to say that if you see a rule being broken, just say, point of order. The chair will recognize you, or should recognize you, at which point you must state the rule that is being broken. That's what a point of order is for. Don't use it as an opportunity to debate. I've seen this happen a lot of times in meetings. Somebody will say, point of order, and the chair will recognize them because the point of order takes precedence over everything else, and then that person will start debating on the issue. No, that's an illegitimate use of point of order. Be ready just to state the rule that was being broken, and the chair hopefully will agree with you and then begin to follow the rules. If the chair rules against you in a point of order, right, no, that your point is not well taken, we're going to continue doing it the way we're doing it, you then have the right to overrule the chair. In fact, no matter what decision the chair makes, the assembly has the right to overrule the chair with this device called the appeal. Everybody needs to know about this. This is the only way you can really enforce the rules in your organization. By one member making or taking the appeal and another seconding it, the question is taken from the chair and vested in the assembly for final decision. This is the majority rules fundamental principle in Robert's Rules of Order. Okay? So I'll just go through this. A member states, "I move." The chair rules it out of order. That member or any other member can then say, "I appeal from the decision of the chair." If the chair is following the rules, the chair will then state, the decision of the chair is appealed from, and then debate will ensue. The chair will then say, "Shall the decision of the chair be sustained?" And that's the opportunity where the entire membership gets to vote on whether the chair is right or wrong. Okay, really, really important. 3 most important motions in Robert's Rules of Order is the main motion, the point of order, and the appeal, as far as I'm concerned. There are a bunch of other motions I haven't talked about because they are of less importance than the 3 that I just mentioned to you today. Finally, if you want to see the more advanced presentation, take a look at practicalrobertsrules.com. And they're there for you to watch. I did one here on the rights of members last year. That one's available for you to watch, and I strongly encourage it. Thanks very much for your attention.